last time we were on this class, we looked at the code pipeline, right? There was a practical we did on the call. We did see that code pipeline is made up of a source stage. A source will definitely pull um, a repo, right? And I think I've said it before that um, usually what brings to life CI/CD is collaboration, right? Collaboration, the fact that there's like a GitHub repo and people are working from that GitHub repo. So there is versioning, all that is in place. There's version, there's release, there's tagging, and that's like where a pipeline will shine, because most times you can choose to release a particular branch or a different branch. You can choose where you want to deploy the changes to, right? So we saw all that. And I did say we did use some steps, but it doesn't mean you can't customize it or you can't even extend it. You can do anything you want to do with an AWS code pipeline. Okay, the use case would always depend on what are you trying to do, what are you trying to use it for, or what are you trying to achieve. Okay, today we're going to be looking at we'll continue the series and we'll look at CodeArtifact. So in one way or the other, we've used this, but just and again, it's still, I would always say this: the cloud is not like everything you see in the cloud is not new. Okay, I will always say it, because if you have that mindset, it just makes you understand that it's not like this thing called cloud, like everything you see in the cloud is new. All right, many of the things you see in the cloud, they already exist. It's just that the cloud is trying to give you like a place where you can have everything, right? It's just like I told you about code commit, for example, which is now like a service that has been deprecated. But the whole idea is that even inside of AWS, you can have your own code collaboration tool, right? So you can see they are stretching the limit as much as they can to make sure that everything you need is in the cloud, right? And there's a reason you want to do that, because if you were thinking about, oh, I just want all my services to be in my region, or I want everything to be in one place, right? So it means that if you have a cloud platform that already gives you everything, that means there's no point going out, right? All your images can be stored locally, even your artifact can be stored locally, right? So if you think about, before now, we've been doing things like pip install, right? You would think about, you do pip install. That's one popular command to install from a Python, like a Python code at like a repository, right? A Python repository. So we've been doing that. But what if we wanted to host ours? And that's where CodeArtifact comes in. So every time you do pip install or you do npm install, npm is popularly, obviously, if you are in the JavaScript realm, you know npm, right? But pip, we've done that at some point. I think in the last class we were doing pip install from a requirement file. So whatever we're installing was coming from somewhere. That place is a repository, right? So in AWS, you can have your own, right? You can host your own repository. So in this case, AWS CodeArtifact allows you to do that, right? So you can store and share software packages securely. So inheriting all the security push features that AWS has. And there's many reasons you want to do that, right? Maybe you want a situation whereby all the packages that will be installed for your applications are from a vetted repo, right? A vetted repo, it has the exact versions that you want. It has gone through security screening, and then it's only from there you can install. So you can't install from the outside, right? So there are many reasons why you want to do that. It supports many of the things we've seen. So npm for JavaScript, Maven for Java, Nugget, obviously, if you were in the .NET world. There's also Python, which is PyPy. When you do pip, that's what you mean. And then there's Ruby gems, right? What I just really want you to take from this is the fact that whenever you do that, and you ever get to a point where you want to host your own repo, right? You can use AWS CodeArtifact to do that. In fact, a lot of the big companies will do that because they don't want you to be pulling artifacts from the internet. So they will host theirs, make sure it has all the security best practice, and then you can only install from the company's repo, right? Remember, it's different from the ECR that we saw. ECR is basically for container images, right? It's different. Container, it's more or less like it's like you've containerized something, right? And you throw it inside ECR. It's different from artifact. Artifact is basically code that you publish as a version and then you can install, right? Inside of a Docker container, sometimes you install artifacts, right? But in this case, we are saying that we want to use the AWS CodeArtifact to do that. So obviously, to support everything that a normal code repo would support, right? So package versioning, publishing, fine-grained access control. That's why it's inside of AWS. Integration with code build. We've seen how we've been able to install packages inside of code build. If you have CodeArtifact, there's that integration, right? Upstream repo support also, meaning you can obviously use a repo that is upstream to whatever you're hosting inside of AWS. And what's the benefit? Centralized artifact management. And there is many reasons people want to do that, right? For improved security, or you still want everything to just be inside of your AWS ecosystem, right? And that brings us to Systems Manager. So when you think about Systems Manager, for example, we've seen how I think if you think about when we're doing CI/CD, we talked about the fact that you are deploying code, right? That's what we talked about. And we've also seen how we talked about many of the things that can help you do migration. But a lot of the times we talked about migrating database, right? We talked about when you have a database, you could use like a DMS, like a database migration service to migrate data. We've also talked about where you could like use a lot of the tools that AWS has to migrate your data from on-premise or from whether it's it's in a different, maybe you started from Azure and one day you thought about going to AWS, right? But when you think about it in the real world, people have machines, right? They have like machines that are either in the different cloud or they're in AWS, right? And they want to move it over. And that's where Systems Manager comes in. It does more, but honestly, that part of System Manager is something I need you to take from I need you to more or less like hold, like take it like that's like for me one of the most important part of Systems Manager is the fact that it's really managing infrastructure at scale, right? Um, and what it means is that it's not just your own infrastructure that is inside of AWS, in this case, your EC2 machines, but also even machines that are in the cloud, sorry, that are on premise, right? So that is not inside of AWS. So what it does is really it helps you do resource management and automation, right? So think about it. If you have like 5 machines on premise, you have like 5 machines inside of AWS, and you wanted just one place where you could automate everything around those machines, right? Yeah, you can do that with Systems Manager. Patch management, right? If you wanted to patch what is on premise and patch what is in the cloud, you can do it with Systems Manager. Configuration management is what people know of, right? That's the most popular one. When you hear parameter store, when you hear Secrets Manager, that's what people know about Systems Manager. But Systems Manager does more, right? It does more. You can manage like your machines at scale, right? Obviously, you can do SSH, and then we will also see Secrets Manager and like a parameter store, which is like the most popular. And I think I've said a lot of things about agents, right? We've seen code deploy agent. You saw how we used it when we're deploying. Also, Systems Manager, one thing that brings it out is there is an SSM agent. So if you really want a machine to be controlled by the Systems Manager service, you just need an SSM agent running on that machine, and then with the right privilege, you will be able to use Systems Manager to control that machine. Okay. So no additional charges, for the most part, it is really the services you are dealing with underneath that you get to pay for. Okay. So SSM agent, just so you know, it's really an agent that runs inside of the machine that allows you to do anything related to Systems Manager. So for example, if you had a machine that is on premise and you had a machine that is on cloud and you wanted to manage both of them, you wanted to be able to stop both of them at the same time or do some run some commands around those machines, right? You just need one thing between the two of them. You just need Systems Manager, SSM agent on the 2 machines. And for that reason, you'll just be able to do things around Systems Manager, right? So it's pre-installed. So for many of the demos that we'll do in this class, you'll see that the Linux tool, we don't really need to install it again. But why we can just go ahead is because it's already installed. It comes with it, okay? And for other operating systems, there's basically a number of steps that you need to take. I won't go into it, but you basically more or less like execute some set of commands, and there is so many things it helps you do, right? Maybe you are on premise, you want to do migration, or you want to know what that migration is going to entail in the cloud if you ever had to do that, right? Systems Manager, you install it, connect the machines to your Systems Manager. You can even start from just collecting information, like just trying to understand, okay, how is my on-premise setup? How many machines do I have? Which machine is running on which operating systems, which version? You can do all that, right? Using the SSM agent and the Systems Manager integration. Obviously, IAM is going to be required because it's obviously an AWS service. So even on-premise, you still need some set of credentials for you to do whatever you need to do. 443, obviously, is the outbound HTTPS access. So it's here. Just just introducing you to it so that you get to see that as time goes on, it's something that is needed for you to really do more complex things with SSM and Systems Manager. Many of the things people know is parameter store, Secrets Manager, but it's good you understand that it can do more, way more things. Okay. And so that brings us to Session Manager just before we go into the UI. So if you now think about Session Manager is a capability, it's a capability of Systems Manager, right? So it's a feature inside of Systems Manager. And the whole idea is that we've seen, I think, and it's good we are doing this now because we've seen how to SSH into a machine. We've seen how to use Instance Connect, but there is also another option. You can also do Session Manager. The whole idea is that in this case, you don't even need SSH keys, right? You don't even need port 22 open like we've seen when we're dealing with Instance Connect, right? And the good thing is that it's also fully auditable. Your logs, you can actually see logs of who went into the machine at what time, right? Cross-platform support, basically, you just need, like we said, anything around the Systems Manager realm, you just need the SSM agent to be running on that machine, right? You don't need to manage the infrastructure. It's just the point here, right? The service is there for you. You just need to configure it and then use it. Enhance security posture, obviously, because you don't want to be either sharing your key pairs here and there, or you don't want to more or less like be opening your port 22 because you are not sure who is using it. And then compliance and audit trails, they are also there for you to see, right? So let's see what Systems Manager looks like in the console. And obviously that's going to take us to like the what do you call it, the um, Session Manager, but that will take us to the Systems Manager console. Okay, so here I'm just going to type Systems Manager. So if I go here and I type Systems Manager, you see that there's a lot of things inside of Systems Manager, right? So there's more or less like Fleet Manager, there's Patch Manager, there's like Run Command, and one of the things you see here, which is the one I'm talking about, is Session Manager, right? But there's so many things, right? So even documents, at some point you'll be seeing what like automation documents are, because yeah, the Session Manager parameter stores, they are basically like the very simple things you can do, but there are more things, right? But what powers all of them together is really the fact that you can use an SSM agent and connect a machine to the Systems Manager service, and for that reason, that machine just becomes you can basically see that machine and then you can act on it, right? So the first thing we're just going to do is that we're going to go to EC2, the EC2 console. So we'll go to EC2, and then we'll launch one EC2 instance, okay? So we're in my region. I'm going to go to instances. I'm just going to launch an instance, okay? In this case, I'm not going to, there's nothing I'm going to add. So I'll just do my web server, my web, I don't know, my system is a bit slow, but yeah, I think we can go through it. So T3 micro, I'm just going to proceed without a key pair because that's the whole idea. You don't really need to SSH into the machine at the end of the day, right? And before we used to allow SSH if we wanted to use more like Instance Connect or like, but in this case, we don't really need any traffic to go into the machine, right? And pretty much that's it, right? So advanced, normally we want to set like a user data script. We don't really care at this point. So we're just going to create the instance, right? So the instance is creating. So one thing you take note of is the fact that that instance is created right now. It's using a Amazon Linux AMI, right? So it just means that it already has Systems Manager installed as part of it, right? Okay, so that's just one thing you need to know. So for anything to be controllable by Systems Manager, you have to have like the SSM agent running inside of the machine, right? And then for a Linux, like an AL 2023, AL 2022, all those kind of machines, they already have it pre-installed. But it doesn't matter. If this was a different OS, I would just install the SSM agent inside, okay? And then there is one thing that we need to do basically. So right now, we don't really have any IAM role attached to this, right? So we don't really have any IAM role attached to it. So what we need to do is to assign an IAM role. So I'm going to go to actions, I'm going to go to security, and then I'm going to do modify IAM role, right? I'm just going to pick one here. There is, maybe there is even no role here. So I'm just going to do IAM, and then I'm going to create a new one. I'm just going to create a new role while we're on this call. So I'm going to go, I'll do roles, I'll do create role, who is going to use it. In this case, it's going to be EC2 instance, and then I'm going to do next. And then all I need to do is I need to type SSM. So I'll just type SSM, right? There is the if you can see it, let me scroll in a bit. So what you just need that machine to have is the SSM Manager instance core. So there's a role called Amazon SSM Managed Instance Core. And if you open it, basically you can see what it does, right? So you can see commands like get document, describe document. We won't be doing all this for now, but really it's just giving Systems Manager the power to do things on that machine, right? Once it has SSM Agent installed, okay? So we're just going to enable this role. So we're going to create it, and let's see, we'll do this, we'll do next. We'll call it EC2 role, okay? And then we will create role, right? So, and then we'll go back to that machine, and then we'll refresh this page and choose a role. We'll choose the one we just created. So EC2 role, and we're just going to update the IAM, right? So the thing is that what do we now need to do next? We need to first of all go back to that instance. So we go here and then look at our connect options, right? So if you see the connect options here, we've seen instance connect in the past. We've used that extensively. SSH is also there as an option. We've not talked about this too, but what about session manager, right? I think it still was unable to connect to systems manager endpoint to register itself. Let's just give it time. Sometimes it takes time. But ideally, after a while, it should register itself. It should give us that ability to connect. So let me go back to it and do this one again and try to connect. It's still saying SSM manager is not. I'm just going to reboot it for now. Let's give it some time. Because we're using AL 2023, it already has systems. It has the SSM agent installed, so we should be able to connect. But while that is being loaded, what we can actually do is that we can actually go to, for example, we can go there. There are many things you can do here, but let's even go to Fleet Manager and see. The Fleet Manager basically can, for example, can tell you the fleets that you have, right? Whether it's on-premise or inside of AWS. The most important thing is that there is SSM agent running in there and there is that connectivity, right? Okay, so in this case, for example, it knows there is an EC2 instance here, right? So you can see, it gives you all the details. And it's like an inventory, because just the way you are seeing this, you can also see inventories that are even on-premise, right? So you can see things like it's a Linux platform, the agent version, right? So this is one of the key things you need to take note of. The SSM agent I was talking about, this is really it, right? So it tells you all this. It says the association status is still pending, right? So let's see if we can do this. Yeah, it says, yeah, you can see it has changed, right? So this success that you see here, I think it tells me that the EC2 machine has finally registered itself with Systems Manager, right? So what it means is that if I go back to that place that was failing before, to connect to Systems Manager endpoint. Oh, okay. I think I know the problem in this case. Where is this guy installed? Let me see. Let me see. Let me scroll down a bit. Yeah, it has public internet, so just trying to check the subnet. Uh, okay, I think I should be here. Which subnet is this? Okay, it's one of my public subnet. Cool. I'll try it again. Yeah, sometimes there's always these nuances, right? But you can see now it's there. The connect button is, on. Yeah, like I can connect now, right? So if I do this, it's going to open a new shell. The whole idea is that I did not enable SSH. I did not expose port 22, right? All I did was to create an EC2 instance that had the systems manager the SSM agent running on it, right? And then I'm in the machine. So it's a connectivity option, right? That is powered by Systems Manager, right? So um, if I do sudo su, sorry, for example, and I do, yeah, so I'm in the machine. That's just what I'm trying to say, right? So I'm basically in. The whole idea is that I didn't really need to do like SSH into the machine. I didn't have to do all that. Just having this SSM agent running on the machine, that's one. And secondly, having that role, the SSM, I think it's managed. Yeah, that name can be a bit tricky sometimes, but let me look for it. I think it's here. You just basically need to know it's yeah, it's the which one did I add just now? EC2 role, right? You just basically need this role, which is the SSM managed instance core role, right? Once that is added and the SSM agent is running on the EC2 machine, you'll be able to connect without SSH, right? So we saw how we could do it directly from the EC2 instance. So just clicking on the EC2 instance, you can connect. One of the connection options is Session Manager. It's going to open a new shell for you. You can connect without SSH, right? Cool. But again, even if you go to Systems Manager, for example, Fleet Manager, I think there is also, so if I go here, there is a place for Session Manager. So there's still, it's like a feature inside of Systems Manager, right? So what it means is that you can start a new session, right? And you can either do it directly from the EC2 machine, or you can pretty much do it from here. And you can even do it from your CLI. So it means that if you have the right setup in place, you can, from your CLI, more or less like do session manager, create like a session manager connection to your EC2 machine, right? Without SSHing, okay? So you can basically start session. It's just another way you can do it. But usually I do it directly from the machine. I'm still getting the same result. Um, so if you go back here, you see that there are other things, right? At some point, you'll be able to run a command. Like you can run a command for not just one machine, but multiple machines at the same time. You'll be able to patch, run like patch services on not just one machine. Because if you think about it, if you wanted to run like an upgrade, or you wanted to do like so many things on top of like thousands of machines at once, how do you do it, right? All that you can do it with Systems Manager, right? But one of the things I've shown you just now is the SSM, the Session Manager part of Systems Manager, okay? So we'll continue, and then we'll come back again inside the console. So that's Systems Manager in a nutshell. Basically, you don't need SSH to be on. I'm not going to spend so much time on the benefit. There is really a lot of it, right? You saw how before we had to like enable SSH ports. We had to open it. For example, we had to like restrict the IP addresses that we're connecting. But in this case, you don't need to do all that, right? No bastion host obviously is needed, because in the real world, you connect to a public EC2 instance. From there, you go to a private EC2 instance. In this case, you don't, right? You can directly connect to the machine. Compliance, obviously, one of the major reasons you want to use it is for compliance reasons, right? And then that brings us to another feature of Systems Manager, right? Which is called parameter store. And it's basically for configuration management. As much as it is as simple as configuration management, the question you ask is, why will you need that, right? Because if you think about it, when you start building in the real cloud, like when you start building in the cloud, you would have your services that are running in different accounts, right? They'll be running in different accounts. So in a particular account, you can have multiple services running, right, from different places, and sometimes you can have them running across different accounts, right? The thing is that, how do you think they should share? Like what? Like if you wanted to now think of sharing resources, like sharing configurations between the services, whether in the same account or within different accounts, is really where parameter store comes in, right? So it's basically for configuration data, right? Secure hierarchical storage for configuration data. Hierarchical there is basically I would say it's you if you wanted to create that, but it supports it. You can actually put your configuration in a follow like a hierarchical pattern to store your configuration, right? Such that you can actually see all the keys that are stored, all the configurations that are stored within a particular hierarchy, right? It supports different strings, secure strings. You can have those, right? Encryption, you can also have encryption around it. You can use tag-based access control, right? So it means you can tag it, and then use I don't think we've seen that, but it's also a possibility for you to more or less like use tag like to control who has access to what, right? You can use basically the tags that are applied. Use case application configuration, database connection string. If you had like API keys that you wanted to store in the real world, you will not just throw it anywhere. You throw it in a place that is, built for that, right? And then aside, so we're still in Systems Manager. So if you think about parameter store, there is also Secrets Manager, right? So what it means is that one is really geared towards configuration. The other is geared towards keeping secret, right? You know, and so what, like I said, configuration data. The other one is secret, right? And from their name, I mean, one is just like a parameter store, right? And the other is really for managing your secrets. Okay. One thing you need to know is that manual rotation obviously is required, but in Secrets Manager you can do more, right? You can basically do more things around doing rotation, like doing secrets rotation. For parameter store, you have basic versioning, right? And in secrets, you can actually do advanced versioning and staging. What it means is that for a particular secret, you can have multiple versions, right? Obviously, both of them are actually integrated with many AWS services. What it means is that you can, from there, do things, right? You can pretty much just, yeah, connect from other services to parameter store, however you want to use it, right? And again, what I also mean is that, for example, if you wanted to know when like a parameter changed and you wanted like an event bridge event, like an event in event bridge that is triggered for something else to happen, there's that integration, right? So it means there's a lot of integration with the other AWS service. Use case for the most part, some people use parameter store in many places, but when you're really talking about like secrets, like if you really need to keep secrets, you should keep them in Secrets Manager, right? So like things like your database configuration, um, things that you also need to like follow like a proper rotation plan around it, right? And then obviously parameter store, you can just do configuration data and basic configuration data. So let's see what that will look like in the console. So remember, these are still features. Especially the what do you call it? The parameter stuff. Parameter stuff is actually a feature of Systems Manager. Secrets Manager is obviously different. So let's look at parameter stuff. So that's like the second service we are looking at inside of Systems Manager, right? So here, obviously, if you remember, we did the last class. We did like a CDK class. I don't know. I think at some point this was created, right? So let's even look what is inside. So one was created, they did create a hierarchy, say CDK bootstrap, blah, blah, blah version. I don't know. It depends on how you want to name things, right? But here I can see that the version it was set to 18, right? It means that they created this and they'd be like, okay, the version is currently 18. We can create ours. So we can go to here and we can create our own. Remember, this is configuration, right? Data. So you can pretty much do things like you can do maybe prod or however you want to nest it, but you can do things like RDS, you can do prod, you can do things like you can say instance, maybe, I don't know, maybe endpoint. Let's call it endpoint, right? Um, we can call it endpoint, right? So we can say my RDS endpoint, right? Um, And then standard, obviously there is like, you can have standard, you can have advanced. We're not going into details, but you can have like string list, like a list of strings. You can have secure string, right? And for secure string, for example, you would have like a like KMS that you want to apply, right? To more or less like um, yeah, like an encryption on top of the keys, right? If you were keeping something secure, you want a situation whereby if somebody is trying to read it, then they will need to decrypt whatever is kept there, right? But in this case, we'll keep it as simple string and say maybe database endpoint. So we'll just do this, right? You can also, add tags if you wanted. You can call it name. You can say DB endpoint, right? Whatever you want to call it. Um, and then we'll create parameter, right? So we just replicated ours, right? So in this case, we're creating this, right? And you could also create, so because we are doing nested, We can also say RDS prod, and we can say maybe create parameters, and we'll do RDS dash RDS dash prod dash username, right? Username, right? And then the good thing about the hierarchy here, you can say RDS username, right? Username. And then we can set it as a string and say maybe we can call the person root. We can call the person root user. We can do this. Maybe I don't need to care about that. But the good thing is that if you have this structure, what it means is that you can actually have a policy in place that has somebody that can grant access to everything slash RDS slash prod, right? So that's one good way of doing it. And that's why you do it this way. So instead of having policies that target one item, if you nest it like this, what it means is that you can actually have like a policy in place that does, you are only allowed to view everything that is inside of RDS slash prod, right? There could also be things that allows you to do more or less like if it was dev, right? Maybe dev or slash prod, and all that. So let's now go to Secrets Manager. So Secrets Manager, it's obviously completely separate. But sometimes when you talk about parameters store, it's good you talk about Secrets Manager also, right? It's a thing on its own. You basically to keep your secret, right? So we can store a new secret if you wanted. And there's like integration. You can have direct integration with, document DB, for example, if you just wanted something that is generated for you to support the kind of database that you want to work with, right? So there is one for Amazon database, credential for Redshift, credential for other kind of database, or you can just do other types, right? For the most part, like here, you have to choose basically, it creates that direct integration with that service. But again, you can just do plain text, right? You can say my username, it's here, and call it username, and then you can do password, is password, whatever you want to store it, right? But basically, this is something that is it's a secret, so it means that it's obviously not visible like parameter store will be, right? So encryption, you can see you have to choose like an encryption is just there by default because it's a secret. You can't store it. You can't just store it like that, right? So you can do next. The same is you can follow the same pattern. So we can do RDS. We can say RDS prod and we can call it credentials. Why? Because I did have like the username and password right attached to it, so I can say call it my RDS credentials, right? And then you can tag if you wanted to tag. Here you can really set your resource permission. You can say who has access to view this secret, right? Some people you can break this however you want to break it. You can have people see /RDS/prod or just a subset of it, right? But you can do all that. And this is one thing that differentiates Secrets Manager from parameter store that we saw. You can see that you can actually replicate your secret, right? So you can replicate it even across region. But obviously, I'm not doing that now. So let me see. Okay, previous. Let me do next again. I don't want to replicate the secret. Let me see. This is nice. It's nice that US. It's nice that I selected it now, and in the UI, I don't have like an option to remove it. This is nice. Like, let me see. Uh, yeah, but I won't create a secret because now I'm like in here and I want to get out, but I can't. But the whole idea is that you can basically create like a secret and then you can replicate it even in a different account. You can replicate it to a different region, right? And then you can also have an encryption key that is attached to that secret to the secret. Okay. I wouldn't want to. Let me see if I can actually reproduce this quickly somewhere else. It's requiring me to set that, but I don't want to refresh the page. So I'm just going to do this. You've already seen that screen before. So I'm going to do username. Username is whatever. And then I'm just going to say password. There's sometimes you can have this, who knows, like it depends. But if it was just direct integration, there are already things like RDS, Dynamo, Document DB, Redshift that is already supported. But sometimes maybe you have something else that you want to store, like a secret, right? And encryption, obviously, I want that. This is going to be RDS prod. I'll call it my RDS or whatever. Um, and then I'm just going to do next, right? So I'm just going to do next. Yeah, this is, you can see there's room for you to automatically rotate the secret, right? So you can choose these. You can choose when it should happen, how often you want it to happen, and then you can have like a Lambda function that does that for you, right? So the whole idea is that you can think about it that in the real world, you obviously have like a policy in place that says every 1 year or every 6 months, secrets should actually be rotated. It's just so that if something goes wrong, somebody already has access to that secret. When you rotate it, the person is not going to have it again, which is one of those security best practice. But here I'm just going to disable automatic rotation. Yeah, I'm just going to see my summary and I'm just going to stop. And then in there, it did give us like a sample code that you can use depending on your programming language, right? To read that secret, right? Because it's a secret you're creating, but how do you use it? What it means is that anyone in their code within the account or in a different account can basically, if the person has the right permission, they can render this secret and use it, right? So just a way to share configurations from one account or from one environment to the other environment. So it's like configuration management in this case, but for secret. The other one is for configuration management, but not for secret, right? So that's like a good segue to talk about that. And so let's talk about the best practices around many of the things we've done around CI/CD, right? So if you think about the CI/CD we built, we had like a source stage. We did pull in things from the source stage, and from there we did like a build, right? We did like a build, and the build we designed it ourselves, right? It could be as advanced as however we want it, but we just kept like a very simple pipeline, right, and a very simple build process. But one thing that you should learn as part of your journey is that pipelines should be, the designs of your pipeline should basically support small frequent commits, right? So more or less like, and that's why you need pipelines in the first place, right? For especially for small companies and startups, a lot of them want to release, they want to release code often, right? So that's why it's always better to support like very small frequent deployments. Automated testing at every stage. We didn't really put testing into place, but it's one of the things. It's one of the things that we could extend. We could just have a new step that runs a test, right? Test could be anything you want, whether it's your Python code or whatever test you're trying to run, just to show that the application is working as expected. Infrastructure as code, we obviously need that for the consistency that we need. You need infrastructure as code to do that. And then obviously environment promotion strategy, right? So for example, if you were doing a pipeline, like there was a pipeline that would that would deploy to prod, maybe there's a place you have to stage it first, and whatever happens in staging will decide if it has to be promoted to production, right? We've seen how security played a huge role, right? When we're dealing with the things we were working with. You saw how security was at the center of things, right? The code pipeline itself needed permission to talk to all the services it was using, whether it's code build, whether it's code deploy, it needed permission. And then when you were inside code build, you also needed permission to talk to any service that you wanted to talk to, whether it was S3 or CloudFront, right? The same applied when we're dealing with code deploy. The point is that everything in AWS, there's security built around it. So it's something that every service you touch, you have to think about what is the security that is part of this service. So even a pipeline is not exempted, right? A pipeline or any of those build tools that we've seen has security. It just means that they should only be able to do what they are meant to do, right? Just the right permission to do what they are meant to do, right? You saw how we did Secrets Manager. We didn't really go into like actual code to try to pull the secret, pull the secret. But the whole idea is that if you had something that was like a secret, right? You shouldn't put it inside of your CI/CD process. You shouldn't put it inside your infrastructure as code. Rather, you have to either put it inside parameter store or put it in Secrets Manager and then read it from either your pipeline or your console or your code, right? And then so we did talk about artifacts, right? So if you actually wanted to host your own artifact, so what it means is that if you had an artifact in AWS, for example, to keep your your application, like a repo to keep your application versions, right? And what it means is that you obviously need to do scanning around those things to see if they are behaving as expected, especially around security, right? Compliance monitoring is something you need to do, so audit trails to see who has access to what, who is doing what within your account, right? On the quality side, automated testing is something you need to think about, like um, and then obviously if there is like some code quality that you need to check for you to just be sure that the code is there is enough quality around the code that is being rolled out. And then rollback strategy is something that is you can't downplay, right? The whole idea is that um, things can go wrong, right? So when you make a deployment, it can go wrong, and you should be able to roll back if you can, right? Yeah. So in this module itself, it's really about CI/CD, right? And the accompanying tools around CI/CD. And we talked about all the developer tools around doing CI/CD in AWS, right? We said code pipeline brings everything together. It's like an orchestrator. But in there, we saw all these the build services. So code build, code deploy, code pipeline, code commit, which has now been like it's more or less like it's no longer in use that much. But again, all those code star services, we saw all of them. And you saw how we could integrate that to a source control, right? In this case, we use GitHub, right? But you can use other source control, basically like version control around code, right? Systems manager, what we saw wasn't we yeah, because systems manager, like I said, a lot of people know systems. They do parameter store, and then SSM session manager as part of systems manager. But systems manager itself, it's a big deal. So if you were ever doing like systems management on premise and you wanted to do it in the cloud, that's really where to be, right? Because in there is where you are bringing like you're trying to more or less like one pane of glass for you to manage both your on-premise infrastructure and your cloud infrastructure. And I think I also mentioned it that code deploy supports on-premise, right? On-premise and the cloud, right? And I also told you that Elastic Beanstalk only supports AWS, right? Deploying inside of AWS. It's just that in this case, most times Systems Manager, you can basically use it to do many things, like do many things around your on-premise environment. Who know? I mean, it's for example, you can run scripts, right? Who knows? Maybe those scripts are also setting up a sort of deployment, kind of. So it's good you know all these things, and you have like a mental picture about it, so that once we start going deep, it becomes very easy for you to like bring everything together, right? Obviously, session manager, like I said, is one way for you to just connect into your machine. We saw that you just need two things. You need like a role. The machine needs to have a role, and then the machine needs to have the SSM agent installed on that machine, right? In our own case, we didn't have to install it. It comes with all the AWS Linux AMIs, but in other AMIs, you have to install it, right? In some unsupported AMIs, you have to install it. Parameter store and secrets manager, they both handle configuration securely, depending on which is your choice. Obviously, there are some deeper details that we need to learn at some point about the difference between them, right? But both of them, they are good configuration house that you can put things, right? Um, I think as you go deeper in CI/CD, because it's really at the core of DevOps, right? Whether you're a cloud infrastructure developer or like you're a DevOps engineer, CI/CD is going to be part of everything you're going to be doing, right? Even if you build a CI/CD today, there'll be need for you to improve it. It could just be you want to support, maybe at the time you built it, you were only supporting Python, and now you need to support Java, right? Maybe as at the time you started working with the pipeline, um, there was no there was no room for you to there was no room for you to not like there was no room, but maybe at the early stage only Python was the only application you guys were dealing with. And maybe like a month or maybe 2 years later there was need for you to start supporting Java application. What it means is that you have to build a build process for Java, right? Because Java will not be deployed the same way as Python is going to be deployed, right? So it means it has to be container. You have to build like a container that is suited for the application. You have to think about how you're going to deploy it, right? And the pipeline has to be very seamless. It has to be something that no one will notice that much, like, oh, it just works. That's what everyone wants to see. Like, I push a Java application and it's deployed automatically, right? So it means that as you're doing all that, you also have to be thinking about best practices, which is some of the things that I'm mentioning, right? Around security, around um, whether it's around security or you want to do audits, right? Around your how everything is correct connected. We'll see that in depth at some point, right? So the summary is that developer tools is basically essential for the modern cloud, and the reason is because there's really a lot that is going on, right? For a lot of times you want application to move from where it is being developed, right? I think we sampled GitHub, but it's not only GitHub. People have different places where they collaborate. Code needs to move from there to production, right? Or to like a staging environment. And in between that, there's a lot of things that can happen. There's build that can happen. There's testing that can happen. There is validation that can happen. There is like stage it somewhere, test it, run QA against it, and then once that is good, you can promote it to production, right? So we saw all these things, and then that brings us to like the end of this particular module. And I know there's a particular reason why sometimes I keep them modular. It's just for you to pretty much be able to go back to it and see them like at a glance, the services that are really connected, right? Instead of just like you're touching like you're in one subject like CI and then you're talking about other things, right? So that's why it's kind of modular, breaking it such a way that it's easy for you to just relate with like a piece of services that works together, and we'll just treat them that way. Okay. So which is good. I mean, we've been able to look at the CI/CD tools, and then we've been able to at least show something practical, right? About how to do CI/CD. And for example, we just introduced. I know obviously Session Manager is a bit different, but this parameter store that we saw, the secrets manager that we saw, you'd need that when you start working with even your infrastructure as code. Because for example, CloudFormation will not allow sometimes if you have like you need to make reference to like a secret or like a parameter something in the parameter store, you don't, or something that is a secret, you don't have to like put it inside of the infrastructure as code. Instead you have to keep it in either parameter store or secrets manager and then pull that in. The same applies to your code build, right? If you're doing something in code build that needs like a secret credential, you don't want that secret credential to be on GitHub. Rather, you want it to be in a secrets manager or like a parameter store, and then from code build, pull it down and then use it for your build process. A very practical example is your GitHub token, right? So your code is in GitHub, right? When you pull down the code, for example, like sometimes you need to like you have a pipeline and you need to connect to GitHub, right? So you could have something like your GitHub access token, for example. You don't want to store that, like just store it plain text. You have to pretty much keep it somewhere, pull it during the build process, and then use it, right? But we'll see many of those advanced use cases at some point. But the whole idea is that we're really setting up the foundation that helps us operate well when we get to that stage. Um, yeah, that's a good segue to end this particular module.